Corbyn, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. First of all, Mr Deputy Speaker, could I put on record my thanks to Mr Speaker for attending the funeral of the late Michael Martin on behalf of this House this morning in Glasgow. Does the Prime Minister agree with her Foreign Secretary that the plan for a customs partnership set out in her Lancaster House speech is in fact crazy?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, we are leaving the European Union, we are leaving the customs union, but of course, for our future trade arrangements, a trade relationship with the European Union, we will need to agree customs arrangements which will ensure that we leave the customs union, that we can have an independent free trade policy, that we can maintain no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and that we have as frictionless trade with the European Union as possible. And I'll tell the right honourable gentleman what's crazy. What's crazy is a Leader of the Opposition who for years opposed TTIP and now has a policy that would mean Labour signing up to TTIP with no say in it whatsoever.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr Speaker, could the Prime Minister explain why she and her Cabinet wasted weeks working up proposals that the EU said was unworkable, the Foreign Secretary described as crazy, and does she agree with her Business Secretary, who apparently backs the crazy customs partnership proposal, but made it clear he doesn't back a technological alternative when he told the BBC that jobs would be at risk if we don't sort out a comprehensive customs deal?
What the Business Secretary said on Sunday was that it was absolutely right that we should be leaving the customs union. And if the right honourable gentleman wants to talk about jobs, I'm happy to talk about jobs. Half a million jobs lost under the last Labour government, record employment rate under this Conservative government.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr Speaker, the government says it has two options. The Foreign Secretary says one is crazy. Sir Ivan Rogers, our former EU ambassador, said that the technological alternative is a fantasy island unicorn model. They have two options, neither of which are workable. The case for a new customs union with the European Union is clear: to support jobs and living standards. Why is the Prime Minister ignoring all the major business organisations, all the major trade unions in backing a customs union? Isn't it time she stood up to those described last night by the Father of the House as these wild right-wing people?
Prime Minister!
We are leaving the customs union. What we are doing is ensuring that we deliver customs arrangements that leave the customs union, that ensure no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, as frictionless trade with the EU as possible, and an independent trade policy. But what would Labour give us? They want to go into a customs union with the European Union, with no say over trade policy, with Brussels negotiating trade deals in their interest, not our own. The Labour manifesto said they wanted to strike trade deals. Now they've gone back on that policy. Typical Labour, letting Britain down once again.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr Speaker, she presides over a divided cabinet. She's had 23 months. She has had 23 months in order to negotiate an agreement and hasn't made any progress on it. The CBI says a comprehensive customs union after transition is a practical, real-world answer. The TUC, on behalf of 6 million workers in this country, put it simply, ruling out a customs union risks jobs. The government continues to reject a new customs union, but at the weekend the Business Secretary made clear that neither of their options would be ready to be implemented by December 2020. So can the Prime Minister tell us what is her preferred option and on what date it will be ready to be implemented.
Minister.
Well, the right honourable gentleman talks about the length of time in the negotiations. Of course, it wasn't until March and the agreement to move on to the next stage of negotiations that it was possible to have discussions with the European Commission on the customs arrangements. There are two options. There are two options that were in my Mansion House speech. Questions have been raised about both of those options, and further work continues. But I just say, if I may say this to the right honourable gentleman, he has spent an entire career opposing a customs union. Now, when the British people want to come out, he wants to stay in. I know he's leader of the opposition, but that's going a bit far.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, due to divisions within the government, these negotiations are in a shambles. And this House is being denied the opportunity to debate crucial legislation affecting the future of our economy and communities all over Britain. So can the Prime Minister now tell the House when we will debate the trade bill and when we will debate the customs bill? She's had 23 months in order to get ready for it.
Minister.
The right honourable gentleman talks about the state of the negotiations. The right honourable gentleman talked about the state of the negotiations. Before December, he was saying that the negotiations weren't going to get anywhere. What did we get? A joint report agreed by the European Council. He said before March we wouldn't get what we wanted in the negotiations. What did we get? An implementation and an agreement with the European Union Council. We're now in negotiation for the best deal for the UK when we leave the EU, and we will get the best deal for the UK when we leave the European Union.
Prime Minister.
3 months, we'd had a better answer than that from the Prime Minister. Mr. Deputy Speaker, how can they negotiate in the future interests of people's jobs and living standards when Cabinet members are more interested in putting their own futures first? Fundamentally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, how can this government negotiate a good deal for Britain to defend people's jobs and living standards when they're unable to reach an agreement within themselves?
Prime Minister.
I'll tell the right honourable gentleman what this government has been doing to defend jobs. A balanced approach to the economy opposed by the Labour Party. Changes in legislation to more workers' rights often opposed by the Labour Party. We have been ensuring that we see the jobs being created in this country. Employment rate at its highest rate since records began. What we are seeing in relation to the unemployment rate is at its lowest rate for 40 years or more. This is a government that is putting jobs first at every stage of what we are doing. And last week, what we saw up and down this country, whether in Barnet or Dudley or Peterborough, was the British people voting to reject the Back to the Future economic policy of the Labour Party and the broken promises of Labour. They don't trust Labour and they don't trust their leader.